Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Empathy for Ramadan. We are in season 2, episode 2, and I am here today with Shoaib, who is Sri Lankan but based in Dubai, and is here to talk about all the things that you didn't want to ask but you need to know. So, just to give a bit of background, if this is the first time you're joining us on Empathy for Ramadan, this show is all about driving understanding and engagement with the holy month and understanding what it really means to be Muslim and to celebrate the 9th month of the calendar, to celebrate Ramadan. As a Westerner myself, I have had the pleasure of living through probably nearly a decade of Ramadan experiences. But I know for many people around the world, this is a time of year that you don't necessarily have a lot of information about, but also don't know who to ask. So Shoaib has kindly agreed to join us today and talk a little bit about what Ramadan is and what it means to him. Shoaib, thank you for joining us. Thank you for making time.
My absolute pleasure, Mimi. And thank you, honestly, for the work that you're doing. I think it's something that we need more of generally all around the world. It's only through conversation that we can really build true empathy. So I just want to thank you as well for doing that. I think it's really great. So honestly, the pleasure is mine to be here.
Oh, thank you. And I mean, I couldn't agree with you more about conversation, right? The only way to really get to know each other, to understand people that are unlike us, to reconnect our world is to have these conversations. And there is a worryingly high amount of Islamophobia going around our world. So it's up 250%. And when you understand, Shoaib, that there are 1.9 billion Muslims, that actually is a phobia, a segregation against nearly 25% of the planet, right? So we need more conversation. So let's start. Tell us, just open it up, right? We're in week and a half into Ramadan. How's your Ramadan been so far? Tell us about the emotions that you feel in the second week. How's it going? Tell us why this is special to you.
Absolutely. So emotions wise, it can be very emotional, to be honest. Ramadan is one of those months that it really softens your heart. And I think, especially for anyone who is Muslim, for them to understand from our point of view, Ramadan can sometimes commercially be marketed as this time period of celebration, right? And in all honesty, Eid is a celebration, but the month of Ramadan for us as Muslims is nothing but an opportunity. It is an opportunity for us to go really deep to our own selves, right? And to reflect and ask ourselves the question of how sincere are we with our repentance for where we've gone wrong and the mistakes that we've made? How sincere are we in the goodness that we show towards not just our family, but then our neighbors and even people at large? How good are we to the rest of creation, which includes the environment and everything that's around us? And we're human, and we were built with the ability to sin, to falter, to make mistakes. And that's what brings us to one of the greatest opportunities in Ramadan, which is seeking the forgiveness of the Almighty, right? So for me, and I think for every Muslim as well, Ramadan, if I had to summarize it in one word, it's one of the greatest opportunities for us as a believer to improve the spiritual strength that we have. So it can be physically and even sometimes mentally challenging and exhausting, not just because of the fast, but then also because you're up at night, long prayers and all of this. But that is what actually softens your heart, that commitment, that dedication, that sacrifice that you make to it. That is what makes you feel so much more emotional in this month. So that's how it's been for me, and I'm sure that many Muslims around the world would say the same.
Wonderful. Now tell me, with all of that reflection, and as a woman myself, is this month different for women and men? If we don't understand, how do women and men pray differently? Do they do different things? Tell us a little bit about the role of gender in this month and in Islam.
That's a very beautiful question. And one of the beauties in Islam is how clear it is, right? Islam is very clear. If something can be done, it's clear. And if something cannot be done, it's very clear, right? And that's one of the things I love about it. Clarity, as we've come to understand as, a species that has progressed over time, is super important. Whether you're trying to be a high-performing athlete or if you're trying to be a business that succeeds in the world, clarity is a non-negotiable. And this is one of the things I love. So to answer your question about do men and women pray differently? No, not at all, right?
Okay.
Are their roles in the month different? Meaning the way they experience this month, is it different? No. But there is one exception, which could be, females, when they are on their cycle, they will not fast during this time period. And they are given an opportunity outside of that month for whatever it is that you do miss, you can catch up for it. So it's not like they're going to get less reward or they're going to have less forgiveness. Not at all. In fact, one of the things that many people might not be aware of is that in Islam, whatever pain, struggle, or difficulty that we go through in our lives, this is a direct means for the Almighty to forgive us for any place that we have fallen short. So not just in the month of Ramadan, but even outside the month, even something as natural as period cramps that you might be having, that pain that you're having, right? Even for that, the Almighty writes away your shortcomings and your sins. So I can only imagine in a month where any good deed is multiplied by 70, right? Any pain or any struggle that you might have in this month would be amplified. So maybe you could even say there's more reward for a woman who might be going through pain during the month of Ramadan. But to simply answer your question, no, there's no difference in the way that men or women pray or how a man or a woman should observe the month of Ramadan.
Okay, super. So, but here's a question, and the name of the show is all the questions you didn't want to ask, right? So a few of my friends have asked me questions they want to know. Mm-hmm. So some of them are very simple. So for all of our Muslim listeners out there, bear with us. The whole point of this conversation is to help people understand, okay?
Absolutely, yeah.
Is it true or not that women can't go into the mosque or they can't go in where the men enter? What does that mean? What's the difference within a mosque, within a holy building for men and women, and why?
That's a beautiful question. And I like to thank the people who asked it because like we said at the start, this is the only way that we bridge the gap, right? So very simply to answer the question, men and women can both enter the mosque. Absolutely, 100%, right? The second part of that is, do they pray together, like standing next to each other, or is there a segregation? And the answer to that question is yes, there is a segregation. And then, of course, the obvious question of why? Why is there a segregation? I think that's important too, and I'm sure that's the next question on the minds of the people who asked it. And it's simply because, again, the clarity in Islam. So in Islam, when it comes to associating the opposite sex for our own safety and for the safety of those of the opposite sex, there are guidelines, right? And we can only associate in close proximity those who are in Islamic terms what we call a halal relationship, right? So for me, as somebody who is married, it is not okay for me to go and be in company with anyone who is outside of my family who might be a female, especially to the extent of, say, anything that would be physical contact, touch, or anything of that sort. Right? Now, the wisdom behind all of this is to protect us because we are human. We do have emotions towards each other. Men are automatically attracted towards women and vice versa. And this has nothing to do with you being spiritual or not, right? Islam understands that being spiritual doesn't mean that you don't have an inclination for worldly things, right? It's merely a guideline to protect you despite having inclinations to make your way on that straight path of not harming others and not harming yourself as well. So this applies in the masjid as well, in the mosque as well. So in this place of worship as well, it's simply a matter of having that segregation because you are not going to be able to kind of have little plots where one family prays together here and then you have a gap because you're supposed to pray together. So you have all of them praying together in one side of the building and separate allocated place, which is in the same mosque. They are part of the same prayer that we are praying. So there's no separation in the prayer. It's just a matter of separating the men from the women in the place of worship. So I hope that answers that question.
It does, beautifully so, and really, really clear. And I love that sense that you're communicating there around protection. I often hear the word beautiful associated with Ramadan and with Islam, actually. And I have had the honor of interviewing twice people who have converted to Islam later in life through marriage or different realizations. And the words they both use repeatedly were beautiful, the experience of Islam being beautiful. So I love how you explain that to be something around protection and actually to make it easier for you, right? Easier for you to pray and to be with God and to stay in your moment. Next question. Tell us what's in Saudi Arabia. Why are so many Muslims right now traveling to or spending time in Saudi? What's special? What's special about Saudi always, but particularly in this month?
So, like you said, these grounds, Mecca and Medina, they're holy grounds, right? And the level of spiritual the spiritual heightenedness there outside of even the month of Ramadan it's amazing, right? I mean, thankfully, again, because of the blessings of the Almighty, very recently I was able to be there as well, just before the month of Ramadan began. And I cannot answer your question as somebody who's been there in the month of Ramadan, because I haven't, right? And I hope one day I will be there during that time. It's probably one of the most peak times to even get there. But the only way I can think of it is this. If outside of the month of Ramadan, just simply being there, because even just recalling just being seated in those holy grounds and how it made you feel, that sense of, honestly, you really realize how temporary and limited this worldly life is, no matter how we package it or how we sell it, and the sweetness and the beauty of the hereafter that can be offered to you, the tranquility that you feel. And this is outside of the month of Ramadan. So I'm thinking, me being in my own home in the month of Ramadan, that tranquility that I feel, that sweetness that I feel of not being attached to the worldly life, because a distinct, and this was just asked from me by a client of mine yesterday who's a Hindu, and she's not Muslim as well. She was asking me whether Islam asks you not to be attached to the worldly life, meaning, your cars, your houses, your whatever. And the answer to that question actually is no. It doesn't say that you cannot have this. In fact, it says live this life as beautifully as you can, as much as you love, so long as that is not what you live for, right? So I'm allowed to have a beautiful car, but if I crash in that moment, I should be praise and thanks to the Almighty, because He knows best. Maybe this is what was best for me, and that's the attitude that we practice, right? Just yesterday, when walking to the mosque, I saw a little kid fall and hit his head, right? And it was so beautiful, because the dad, as much as he showed that empathy for the child and made him feel loved, the only thing he said, rather than overreacting or anything, is he said, praise and thanks be to the Almighty, right? Now, for a non-believer, that can be confused. I'm like, why are you saying that? But it comes from the belief that we understand that He knows what we don't know, and He sees what we don't. So what happened is in His wisdom, right? So I'm thinking, if we feel this being at home or wherever we are in the month of Ramadan, imagine combining both of this, right? That sense that you feel, the spiritual high that you feel just as a result of fasting and being in the month of Ramadan, but then you go and plug that in to the holy grounds of Mecca and Medina. Honestly, I don't think I can answer your question on what's so special, but I think that can give you a glimpse of why there's so much demand for everybody to kind of make their way there.
Wow. And so is Saudi the birthplace, the beginning, the core of Islam? Why are Medina and Mecca, why are they in Saudi Arabia versus, for example, the UAE where you are? What's the sort of, again, top line, but sort of potted history? What's special about Saudi?
That's a good question. And being very frank with you, my strength in the knowledge of the exact history isn't the best. So the last thing I want to do is to say something that isn't true, right? One of the characteristics of being a Muslim is being truthful, and I surely don't want to violate that one, right? But to answer your question, Mecca and Medina is where the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, lived, and as well as a lot of the message was spread. Now, why specifically did the Almighty choose that destination? Honestly, I don't know, right? And I don't think, and some of the things we leave it to the wisdom of the Almighty. He knows best, like why there, why not here. But one thing I do know is when the message of Islam came, it came at a time and to a place that it was needed the most. The people of that time and the people there were known to be very rough. They lacked empathy, so to say, right? And that understanding and care. And in order, as a mercy to what they were going through and to help them and guide them, was when that message came. And it's because of that, the toughness and the roughness of the people at the time, that even the Prophet ﷺ, peace and blessings be upon him, had to go through the many difficulties and struggles that he did. But I guess it came to where it was needed the most, you could say.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, thank you. And that was the perfect answer. That was absolutely what we all wanted to know. So where you are right now, I'm just looking at the clock, it's kind of around just after the middle of the day. Tell us, I know that you woke up very early this morning. Tell everyone a little bit about a day in the life of Ramadan. Why are you up so early, and do you really sleep all day? And are you really not allowed any water at all? I know these are questions that people ask all the time. So tell us a
Sure.
little bit about the day.
Yeah. So I need to be careful when I answer this because I would obviously be answering for myself, but let me try to give a bit of context for others as well. And the
Perfect.
reason I say that is there are people who do 9 to 5 jobs and it can be different for them. There are people who still might have to do night shifts if they're in a country that might not give them that flexibility to shift. And then there are people like me who I work by myself. So I do have somewhat flexibility to decide how I would kind of organize my day. But for me, how I've organized my day is I would easily say 75% of the commitment in this month is for all acts related to worship. And that could affect my usual fitness routine. It could affect even my work. It could affect all of this. And I'm completely fine with that, right? But I want to really prioritize that. But for me, how it would ideally work is, yeah, you wake up at, I try to wake up by 4:30 a.m. because that gives me just enough time to offer another very important prayer that we offer in the last segment of the night, just before the day begins. And then have a quick bite, something light. We normally have something like eggs or something like that to keep it clean. We avoid eating like heavy meals in the morning. Hydrate as much as possible, and we begin the day. And I would usually start my client coaching sessions early morning. So this would be like up until late morning or early afternoon. Now, alhamdulillah, I'm blessed that I can take a little bit of a nap in the midday at some point to kind of rejuvenate, and then wake up and begin work again, which would be coaching and whatnot. And then from around the iftar time, the time that I break fast, up until around 11:30, 12, this would be a spread out of, going to the mosque, prayers there, maybe Quran recitation. I try to squeeze in a bit of a workout there, a quick one in and out. And, we try to spend the last bit of the night on something like, there's a ton of valuable content out there that a lot of great institutions are putting out, which help us deepen our understanding of the Quran and the way of the Prophet ﷺ. And all of this is again cultivated around increasing that connection with the Almighty. And your question about, yes, do you not drink water? 100% between those two time frames, which is the first prayer in the morning and then the prayer before the last prayer in the night, which is usually at sunset time. Yes, there's no food, there's no water. And to add to that question, it's not only no food and no water, it's also abstaining from anything and everything else that is harmful for you, for your faith, as well as those around you. So people always have the question about smoking, right? I mean, you're not drinking any water or eating, but no, this is out, completely out. And it's one of the fascinations, actually. Even people who claim to be addicted or claim to not be able to stop, they don't touch it even during that time. And this is a miracle. Right, absolutely. Like it's so funny. Like I've met so many people, know people so many. Like no, not at all. Right, and it's a great discipline as well for them. But it's not just that. And another main thing is in the month of Ramadan, the two things that you are asked to abstain from, which usually is permissible in the religion, and this is what makes it really challenging, is your food and drink, which is whatever that is halal, of course, but you're not allowed to eat it for this, and being intimate with your spouse, which would otherwise be something that is even considered an act of worship, right? So these two things that you are allowed 100%, that you are rewarded for even, you are asked to abstain during this time period. So that's what's challenging about it. And the wisdom behind it could be, amongst many other things, is if you can stay away from what is usually allowed for you, does that not mean you have the power and the ability to stay away from that which is forbidden for you or that which is bad for you? And that can be even a bad habit of scrolling too much online, or a bad habit of smoking, or a bad habit of gossiping or backbiting or anything. I mean, if you can stay away from food and drink and intimacy, which is permissible, right? Two of the biggest things that are attractive to us as humans, does that not mean, right? So like the Almighty is giving you an opportunity to realize that you have the potential. It's just a matter of deciding to do it. So that's what it's like in the day for a Muslim, for me, and it can be different for other people, right? They might have different schedules and whatnot, but by far and large, the intention is to pack your day as much as possible with being connected with the Almighty and being, in acts of worship, which isn't limited to reciting and praying, because acts of worship also means feeding people. It also means forgiving people. It also means being kind to people. It means working your job to earn money for your family. All of these are acts of worship. It's not just prayer and recitation.
Amazing. I mean, and that's new to me as well. I love that, that definition of acts of worship being all kinds of areas beyond praying. If we're talking to somebody who is perhaps a leader or a line manager, and they are not Muslim themselves, and they have team members who are Muslim this month, and again, I think in the Middle East, having lived in the Middle East, living in Asia, living in Europe, in the Middle East, the entire system changes in this month, right? The country, society, everything changes for Ramadan. But of course, if you're a line manager or a leader in a society or a part of the world where there are let's say less Muslims in that community, or just less acceptance of Ramadan, what advice would you give them as a Muslim yourself? If you were in that environment, let's say you were in Europe somewhere, the rest of the team are working, right? And perhaps the organization isn't necessarily giving you shorter hours because we haven't got to a point in that organization of proper cultural understanding. What can that boss, that leader do to empathize, to support, to understand their Muslim colleagues during this time?
That is a brilliant question. And I think the answer to that question on both ends, both the line manager or the employer, as well as the person who might be the one fasting, is actually in the name of the show, which is empathy, right? I couldn't find a better answer to that. And from the point of view of the one fasting, first of all, what I would say is that we as Muslims also understand that we don't expect everyone to change things in order for it to be convenient for us, right? As a bare minimum, we do expect respect of our choice to follow a faith, but that doesn't mean that you have to move out of the way and change the setting and all of that for us. No, if you don't do that, that doesn't mean that we don't like you or that we hate you or anything of that sort. Not at all, right? The people who had the hardest of lives in this entire world are the messengers of Islam that the Almighty chose, right? And if God showed His love by giving you an easy life and a luxurious and a comfortable one, then the prophets should have been the kings of kings, but they weren't. They were people who barely had any wealth. They had no belongings. They had the hardest of hardships. Their families were killed. The list goes on, right? And one thing we realize is that harder the challenge, greater the reward. So for the person who might be stuck in an environment where they may not have all of that, like unlike the Middle East, for example, where it might be different, you may not have as much flexibility as you're given here. I think that's something to realize. And also to understand that we should have empathy for our employer as well, because they are running a business. They are paying us a salary. They do expect that. I've got clients and I don't cancel on them in the month of Ramadan because, there's a commitment. Right. And it's my duty and obligation. And that can be an act of worship if I have the right intention as well. Right. So I think that we understand that. So if that isn't the case, if we aren't given a flexible hour and whatnot, I think we as Muslims should have empathy. Let me start from there. And then to answer your question, which is if you are a non-Muslim and you have a position of power that you can help out, just know that it's greatly appreciated, right? Those late nights staying up in prayer, we still want to come to work. We still want to do our job. We still want to do our best. And we would really appreciate if it was possible to give us a little bit of flexibility. Maybe those few moments before prayer, if maybe you can let them go a little bit earlier, like a 15, 20 minutes or 30 minutes, it might help them. Or at the bare minimum, give them a 15, 20 minutes during that time for them to have some dates, have some water, relieve themselves a bit, do their prayers, and then come back. And I know for a fact that any believer who would be grateful would definitely return that tenfold to their employer. So I think just that attempt to try and understand what must it be like to be dehydrated throughout the day. You could have headaches towards the last bit of the day. You feel that hunger, a little bit of weakness in the body. You also know you're going to be standing in prayer all night. So you've got all of that going on. So if it's possible to just understand, and if it's permissible, if it isn't detrimental to your organization, it doesn't cause a big harm, it would be something that you can do. But if not, I'm very sure that we would understand as well.
I mean, beautiful tips, and thank you. I think some really, really great ideas in there. And as you said, coming to the title of the show, which was a great way to answer it, right? Just having that empathy. And I think, Shoaib, what I've learned, especially when I was newer in the Ramadan month, and I didn't know it as well then, back in those days, is I have always found my Muslim colleagues so open, like you are today, to answer my questions. So I would also encourage anyone else out there who is working with Muslims and isn't sure when is that prayer time or when can they eat and break the fast, ask, right? Curiosity is the backbone to empathy. And as I said, I've always had a very, very positive experience of asking my Muslim friends to help me understand their month and their routines, and what they need. So don't be afraid to ask if you're listening. As we go into the last 5 minutes, a couple of, I guess, quite simple questions for you. But again, for people out there watching, what is the representation of the moon? It's hard for non-Muslims to understand. Why is Ramadan waiting for a moon, and why does it end with a moon? What's the crescent moon? Tell us a little bit about the role of the moon.
So simply the sighting of the moon, both for the beginning of the fast and then the ending of the fast, has to do with the beginning and ending of months, right? So according to the Islamic calendar, this is a way that we kind of understand that. And this is simply it. I mean, there's no kind of like magic around it or big story around it. It's back in the day, we didn't really have digital calendars and whatnot, right? So a way that we clearly understood, the way that the Prophet was guided on how to identify this was this. So to date, we still follow that system in terms of how we symbolize the beginning of the month, as well as then the celebration of Eid.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so let's go to Eid. What is Eid? If people don't know what Eid is, tell us, what is Eid and what's it all about?
Yeah. So I think that's the one celebration component in the entire month of Ramadan, because the rest of it, honestly, is about sacrifice, commitment, dedication, and all of that. And it's that one day when you've done everything to symbolize and reward yourself for everything that you've done. And even that celebration is done with the other people, which includes both those who fasted alongside with you, who've been with you up at night. Sometimes for kids, it could be their mom who was waking up even earlier than them to be sure there was food on the table. While you were getting some rest before iftar time, maybe it was them preparing the table for you. It could be your employers who were kind enough to give you that time, that space, bringing everyone who was a part of this month, which is not just the Muslims, including your neighbors, the community, everyone around to celebrate. I remember growing up on the day of Eid, my mom would send me to every house in the neighborhood, all of which who were non-Muslims, because when I was living in Sri Lanka, I had Sinhalese, but it's all around with these big dishes of biryani and watla pan and all of these little treats. And it was mandatory. We had to go give it. And as a child, we didn't quite understand it, but now it's ingrained in us, right? And we're grateful for that. So that's the true spirit of Eid. It's about spending time with your loved ones, your family. We've got one prayer that we do in the masjid in the morning, but outside of that, the rest of the entire celebration is about being with community. And again, celebration there, you need to be careful. Celebration within the means of what is halal, right? Celebration is always within the guidelines of what the religion loves you to do, again, for your own safety and your own protection. So this is what essentially happens on the day of Eid. And that's the one celebratory component, you could say. And even from a psychology point of view, we know that when you do something hard and then you reward yourself a little bit, you have more motivation to keep going. So this whole month of Ramadan is a training ground, right? We say that the word in Arabic, we don't call it fasting, right? We call it saum. So saum comes from the root word of siyam, which is basically restraint. It's like a training ground. It comes from this tradition where Arabs used to train horses for battle, because they used to use camels, which were good for long distance travel, but camels are not going to help you in battle or, in a situation where you need to travel fast. But horses can't do that in the desert because they need food and they need water. So Siyam was this training period where horses were trained on no food and no water to survive the conditions of desert, so that when it came to times of battle or they needed to perform under pressure in those situations, they were able to do it. So Ramadan is like that for us Muslims, right? It's a time where your food's taken away, what's otherwise halal is taken away, and you need to be a conscious Muslim who's connected to the Almighty, doing the right thing, staying away from what's wrong. And if you can do it under all of these conditions, what's going to be your excuse out of this month for the next 11 months? You have a spiritual boost and upliftment, a rejuvenation. You're good to go until next Ramadan. You keep getting better. And the goal should be to get better from one Ramadan to the other Ramadan. But it's a training ground. It's the training period. So you give a little bit of a reward at the end with Eid. You celebrate. You're happy with everything you did. And to take all of those learnings and apply it for the next 11 months ahead. So it's a never-ending journey of personal development.
Oh my gosh. And from what I understand from your work, that is your focus and your passion, right, Shoaib? Personal development, progress,
100%.
Version of you. So I think that is
Sure.
just a beautiful way to end what has been a fantastic conversation. So having learned so much in this about how you are spending your days, your time, and the amount of time in reflection and prayer, I'm incredibly grateful that you gave us 30 minutes to come online and to talk to other people out there. So for everyone that listened in, thank you very much for joining us. You can see along the bottom of the screen how you can find Shoaib and hear about his work. Also, one of his free guides. The link is just up. I think it just popped down, but we'll pop it back up so you can find that link. Do stay in touch. And Shoaib, we are now officially friends. So I hope that we can meet soon in Dubai. And, Ramadan Kareem. And I wish you a really peaceful, wonderful, sort of full of growth few weeks ahead. But thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Mimi. You've been very kind. And like I mentioned at the beginning, I'm so grateful that you do this. We did say that conversations are the best way for us to bridge this gap. And it's platforms like yours and initiatives like yours that make that possible. It's been my pleasure to spend this time with you. I hope that we were able to do justice to our viewers. And if anybody has further questions, they can reach out to me on the handles that you've mentioned. I'm more than happy to answer. And yes, we definitely will meet and see how we can do more for society and bridge those gaps. And empathy is one of the words I love. So huge fan of that. Keep doing what you're doing, and all the best.
Thank you. And for anyone out there, if you want to join Shoaib and I in changing the world and creating more empathy, do get in touch with either of us on our handles below. We have 3 more episodes of Empathy for Ramadan Season 2 to come in the next 5 days. So take a look over on my profile. The schedule is there. We have 3 more guests. And again, they're from all over the world. So Shoaib's in Dubai from Sri Lanka. We had Imran, who was also in Dubai recording, but is from South Africa. We have someone from Qatar, someone from the UK, people from all over the world bringing their experience of Islam and Ramadan to you. So please do join us. The dates and times are on my profile. Meanwhile, to all of you who are celebrating Ramadan, Ramadan Kareem, and to everybody else, thank you for joining us.